Good morning, Melissa.
Hi, Phyllis.
So Ron will be presenting, oh, I see, those are the performance investment reports. I got it. Okay. And then following that will be all the Gatsby reports. This must be a big file. Yeah, 86 pages. That's a little larger than we usually do. But you still have all my Gatsby reports in there, right? Above that.
I have whatever you gave yesterday in that whole packet.
Yep. Yeah, what I'm gonna do when the Gatsby reports start after Ron's, I'm gonna just go, yeah, that's the last of Ron's report. And then I wanna just go through, after Ron's report should be the police, not the fire. So go up a page.
This is page 1.
That's Ron's.
And then all of your things
Okay,
start.
that's Ron's for the firefighter. Okay, go to the bottom of all of Ron's reporting. There we go. Okay, the very first Gatsby report should be the police plan.
Okay, well, we'll have to scroll to it.
Here, go up. Yep. Yeah, non-uniform. Up further. There, okay. And then above that should be the police. So I'm gonna just flip through the police plan quickly to show what it contains.
Okay.
And then go down to the Excel sheet that has a summary.
Excuse me, sorry.
Good morning, Ron.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Ron, how are you?
Good.
So that would be, that's the first statement after all Ron's investment reports. What page is that? That's page 44.
Is the finance committee essential business that everybody got their shots already?
I got mine.
I got my second.
So right.
Wow.
Good.
It's called being
I got
lucky.
the immunity.
What'd you say, Keith?
I got the immunity since I already had it.
Oh,
Oh,
It's called 10:30 March now, okay.
we can get the plasma from you, Keith.
Yeah, I'm selling. I'm gonna get the shot, but I just have to wait till 90 days. I have to wait till the beginning of May to get the shot.
I was wondering how that worked. So 90 days after your symptoms?
You're supposed to wait 90 days
Okay.
because the immunity could last up to a year. They don't know, but they know they're pretty sure it's at least 90 days.
Right.
Is that going to get us through election day, Keith?
Actually, yeah, it will. It will.
actually, Keith, Fran called me the other day, with his heart condition. He's having a heck of a time trying to find a place.
Really?
Yeah, I said, well, doctors help you? He goes, no, I've asked him. But he's really concerned about this.
I haven't seen him in person since November. I don't think he's come out.
I don't think he has either.
I didn't know Fran had a heart.
He doesn't. It's a fake one.
It stops every once in a while. But he's got a little one.
Morning.
Good morning.
John,
Hey, John.
Morning, John.
Ron Bittner. Sorry,
Hello.
are we meeting?
We're glad to be meeting today.
Nice to see you.
You too.
Yeah, I would bet you're glad to be meeting. I saw the numbers.
You've turned the corner.
Amazing.
I almost fell over when I saw those numbers.
Yeah, Tom sent me.
Okay, I've been talking for the last minute and a half on mute. Sorry. Like, how come no one's listening to me?
He's working for us. Don't worry about it.
oh, we heard you, Steve.
So now it's 8:01 and I would like to call this meeting to order. My fault. I apologize. Melissa, will you make roll call?
Keith Durr,
Here,
Tom Mull,
Here,
John Gallen,
Here,
Steve Brunner,
Here.
and Greg Portner.
Okay, no Greg. Do we have someone to replace Greg for today?
I'll let John Woodward do it. He's on.
Oh. Greg's coming on right now.
Okay,
Oh, perfect.
perfect. Let me know when he's on, Melissa.
Good morning, everyone.
Here you go.
Morning,
good.
Greg.
So Greg, you're now present? No, am I back to not being heard again?
No, he might be on mute.
Greg,
Hey,
can you hear us?
yes,
Say you're
Can you hear
present,
me?
please. Say you're present.
present.
Thank you. All right.
All right.
Then the first thing on the agenda would be public comment. So do we have anybody out there with public comment?
I just want to say a couple of things, not much, basically on administration. I think we're still facing this situation in which I cannot get a decent answer for Mr. Brandenburg. After all that snow issue, when the board directed him to talk to Jim Babb and everything, I just followed up and asked a simple, respectful question, and no answer whatsoever. I don't know why are we perpetuating this culture of in-your-face discrimination. Why a public servant cannot utter a simple yes or no answer. What am I supposed to do? We had announced another snow. Am I supposed to go and find somebody else? Did we solve this? All I needed is a simple, respectful answer. We need to change this culture. We need to treat everybody with respect, decency. It's a simple email. I don't think that this is acceptable from public servants. And I think you as a commission should not allow this to perpetuate. I think you should ask from these people to try to do better. We all need to try to do better. We cannot continue in this hate. Clearly something was done wrong. Our complaint was visibly valid. He was in the wrong. My wife never heard an apology. Okay, we never asked for an apology, but hey, that would have been nice. Hanging up on a doctor that tells you that she has 20 feet of snow in the street in front of her driveway is not okay.
So this is relevant to the finance committee. How?
It's finance and administration, and you guys have already in the past taught me a lesson that you're dealing with administration. Actually, Mr. Hartman told me that this is an administration, finance and administration. It's not just finance.
You're correct.
Thank you. So this is why I'm addressing here. So I'm calling on you to end this. in most respectful terms, Mr. Brandenburg needs to, I don't know what his reasons are, not gonna call him any names because there's no point, but this is not normal behavior from a borough manager, that we're paying a decent amount of money as a salary. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else out there in public have any comment? Rolling on. Okay, so next on the agenda is the pension valuation. Gentlemen, share the good news.
Sure. Who's ever running the screen there, if you want to scroll up to the police performance report, it looks like the firefighters is first, and then maybe followed by the non-uniformed. There's the police. All right, I'll let Barry go over the performance and investment side of it, and then I'll talk about some actuarial update information.
Okay. First of all, good morning, everybody. It was quite a year. So you just mentioned when you saw the numbers, actually, Ron and I were quite shocked. You know, it was around the third quarter when we're up 1 or 2%, and we felt, geez, if we can get, like a 5 or 6% year, that would be incredible. But you can see the last quarter, I believe it was somewhere around November 11th when Pfizer came out with their efficacy on their COVID vaccine, the 90-some%. And from that point on, the markets really did extremely well. So you can see for the fourth quarter, 11.85%, year to date, almost 16%. And all three plans are basically about the same. They're all invested exactly the same. The only difference is cash flow. So you may see a quarter of a percent difference with year-to-date performances. I'd just like to quickly go over, I know that you have a lot on your agenda. I guess I'll go to the FI 360 report. Just to give you a little flavor of the different assets that you have, the large cap, mid cap, and small cap. The only funds that really were coming under question in that area was Odyssey Stock Fund. It's a prime cap fund. And we did talk to the manager, and he said, what can I tell you guys? Everything is according to the balance sheet. I look at valuations. I look at companies that have strong cash flows, return on invested capital. And actually, we really liked what he had to say. What we had saw was that a lot of growth companies, especially anything that had to deal with the cloud, the web, a lot of these companies aren't really growing earnings, which is what really matters. They're growing revenues, but we're seeing negative earnings in a lot of these cloud companies, and they are the ones that did extremely well. One of your funds, if you look through the report, one of the pages is Best of America. One of your funds, the Morgan Stanley Institutional Growth, I believe did over 100% last year, which really helped the returns. But getting on to the side of the other fund, Prime Cap Odyssey, now this year growth is not doing as well, and Prime Cap Odyssey is one of the best performers in your portfolio. So that's always good to see that we don't jettison a company. We talked to the managers. We liked what he had to say. In the fixed income space, the first quarter, geez, when March came around, it really looked like there's going to be illiquidity in the bond arena. And the Fed stepped in with their various different programs and really, buoyed the bond market. Just a tremendous amount of money. It was billions of dollars to help float the bond market. The bond market did extremely well after the first quarter. And the reason I mention that was that the aggregate bond index was up approximately 3% in the first quarter, and your bond funds were down approximately 3%. So there's like a 6% disparity there. And the reason why is we're a little bit more in corporate credit, quite a bit more in corporate credit, all investment grade. And what happened was the next 3 quarters, you outperformed the benchmark substantially, outperformed it for the year because corporate credit then did extremely well. And your international funds had doubled the benchmarks. And I think that's one of the other reasons why you can see such a year-to-date performance of 15, almost 16% compared to 13. The Goldman Sachs Emerging Market Fund was up over 30%. I believe that benchmark was somewhere around 10. You have some small cap internationals, Oppenheimer International and T. Rowe Price. They had either doubled or tripled the benchmark. And WCM Focused International Growth, another fund that did extremely well. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell. As far as this year, the big thing that we're looking at is, right now, everybody's talking about herd immunity, by the summertime. What I just read a report from Vanguard, and Vanguard is predicting, 4% GDP growth as of the end of this quarter. At the end of the year, they expect it to be 7% GDP growth. Just read another report from Guggenheim, and they had mentioned about the same number, 6.5%. So what the fear is that the Fed said that they're going to stand pat. They're not going to raise rates. And everybody's looking at the yield curve. The 30-year has risen substantially. It's a steepening yield curve. And what everybody's fearful of is inflation. And from all readings that we've been doing, it seems that there's just structural technology in place. Utilization rate is a huge factor when it comes to corporations raising their money or raising their prices, and utilization rates are still down in the low 80%. So a lot of the big firms feel that the inflation will be slightly above the 2%, but they don't see the runaway inflation that people are fearing. So we're staying pat. We do have a very diversified portfolio, and we're starting to see the value companies, the ones that have substantial earnings, the ones that are growing their free cash flow. We're seeing them do extremely well. And as I mentioned, we have quite a few different value funds in the portfolio. So we expect this diversification to, really hold the test of time with the year that's coming. Does anybody have any questions?
Nope. If there's ever a meeting, I wish I was.
I'll leave it up to you, Rob.
We could be around. I'd like to see all the smiles at the table.
Yeah, so that summary page looks similar for all three plans. And you can also see the summary of the 2019 year. So, this 2-year window, hasn't happened for, 15 and 20 years maybe, where we've had, a performance of the 2-year valuation window that's as good as this is. And essentially, that 2-year return is, about 5 years worth of growth. So obviously that's a positive thing, and that's what impacted the valuations and will as we complete the 205 reports, later this year, this summer. So if you want to scroll down on that handout there, a couple pages, the rest of the investment report, you'll see the asset allocations, and Barry does a rebalance each quarter according to our policies. Keep going. We include all the investment funds, their comparisons, and Barry just highlighted some of those funds there. You can see the the year to date and the recent performance, and then the FI 360 is on the next couple pages. And he mentioned a couple of those funds that may have underperformed in a last year or a quarter, but now they've turned around, and some of those are at the top of the list now. Yeah, keep going. And one more. Next. And there's your agenda. And then the next page is the first of the GASB 68 actuarial information reports. So each year now, since GASB 68 was issued, we prepare this update on an annual basis. There's one for each plan. The first thing I just want to point out for information purposes is you can see in the middle there, it says prepared by Foster and Foster. So at the end of last year, the Beyer Barber Company was acquired by a larger actuarial firm. Randy Seacole, the owner of Beyer Barber, is getting close to retirement. He's been working in this field for 40 some years, and he has been looking for an acquisition company for the last, I don't know, 3 to 5 years, and timing was right. And at the end of last year, he sold his business to Foster and Foster. Foster and Foster is a national firm. They have, I think, 8 or 10 offices around the country. But the synergy that we saw and what he saw is that they work in the municipal pension space in other states. So they do have other municipal clients in, I think, Florida and some other Midwest states. So there was a natural synergy there. And the nice thing from our standpoint and our clients is that they did not really have a presence in Pennsylvania. So their firm, the Beyer Barber office, is intact. All of the personnel are intact. Randy is going to stay around anywhere from 2 to 5 years, through exit plan. And so we don't see any difference or any changes in their services. We're going to work closely with them just like we've been for the last 20 years. So just an FYI, that's why the name change. Okay. Next page, please. Again. All right, so this page has 2 important pieces of information, and I won't go through each report. I'll just highlight it in the police here. As of 12/31/2020, we calculate, and this GASB 60 basis is an accounting basis for calculating liabilities. And I mention that because the accounting basis for calculating liability is slightly different than the actuarial basis in the Act 205 reports. They are close, but they will not be identical. So I just want to point that out. But on an accounting basis, the plan assets actually exceeded the liability at the end of this 2-year window. And all 3 plans are right at or slightly over 100% funded, which is an improvement of 20% over the consolidated ratio of about 80% 2 years ago. So this is the biggest move that I've seen since I've been doing this in a 2-year window. And you're not unique. Most pension plans, all of our clients will have something similar to this type of, anywhere from a 12 to 18% increase in their funding ratios. So that gives us some opportunities, some possibilities as far as the next valuation process goes. The second thing I would point out on this page, down at the bottom, you can see there's a sensitivity analysis. And again, each report has this. And what that means is the financial requirements say that we need to calculate and disclose what a 1% change in the discount rate would have, what effect that would have on that net pension liability. And you can see, increasing the rate increases the overfunded position, decreasing the rate takes it from overfunded 1.2 million to underfunded 800,000. So a full 1% change is about a $2 million swing on the police plan. Of course, the other 2 plans are not quite as much because they're smaller assets. But that's important as we discuss the discount rate and changes going forward and what the committee would like to do. So if you want to scroll, I guess you could probably go to the summary chart that Phyllis put together. Oh, stop there for a second. Yeah. So each of the reports also has, this is the last page, and it shows a 7-year history. Eventually, this will be 10 years, tracking all of this data and showing the financial position and the funding ratio at the end of each year, for over the last 7 years. So you can see from this chart, it wasn't, back in 2014, when you were in mid 90% funding. And then 2019 went up significantly because of that, 20% return year. And then 2020 increased again. Okay, you want to go to the chart.
There we go.
There you go. Yeah, so like I alluded to a little earlier, as of the end of 2018, the combined ratio was right at 80%. So through 2019, it increased up to about 95, and then for 2020, it increased again. On that net liability line, a negative is a good thing. Negative means the assets exceed the liability, means it's an overfunded position. So the police and non-uniform, both overfunded. The fire plan is right at it. Okay, yep, next. This is a copy of your resolution, highlighted where you indicated that you want to stay on this path towards reducing the long-term interest rate. I would confirm that this is a good idea because what we're seeing, Barry alluded to a little bit, forward-looking returns are lower, than they have been in from a historical perspective. So the capital markets assumptions for future returns have been coming down for the last several years. That's no different. You're looking into this year, and so most plans, all of our clients, we're having this same discussion of continuing to reduce the assumed interest rate in the 205 reports, trying to get down somewhere in the mid 6% range. The last projection that we looked at shows around a 6% long-term interest rate from all the different asset classes combined, and that rate should be within about 60 basis points of what your assumption is. So 6% projection put you about a 6.5 or 6.6% target, and that's where your policy is taking you. Next. And then looks like Phyllis put together a summary too of all of the sensitivities, just to kind of give you an idea what that would look like if you went a full percentage point. I think that would be too much, and I'll get into that in a little bit.
The next page has a summary in terms
Okay.
of, oh, there we go.
There you go. Okay, so that by using the lower interest rate changes that combined funding ratio by 10%. So it's pretty significant. I think that would overshoot the mark in terms of the balance that we want to maintain between costs and state aid. But that's your call, and we'll have some discussion.
Ron, I'm sorry, I got distracted for a second. Can you go back to that? Go back 2 pages, Melissa, where it shows, if we go to one more. There we go. So it says each 2-year valuation attaining a 6.5% interest rate and assumption of 4% salary scale assumption. I don't think historically we see a 4% salary scale. I think we're seeing more along, and I could be wrong just in interpreting what I'm reading here. I believe, Tom, you can agree or disagree. We're looking at more along the lines of 3 to maybe somewhere between 2.5 to 3.5 at most % salary increases.
Okay, so that assumption, that rate cannot be more than 3% lower than the interest rate.
Okay.
So that's the parameter for Act 205. It could be 3.5 at the lowest with a 6.5% interest target.
Okay.
The reason I think that we targeted 4 and my explanation when this was discussed is even if the contract rates are running 2.5%, 3%, total payroll growth is actually higher because of overtime and other factors. So,
Fair enough.
and keeping that rate a little higher actually provides a little more funding than it would if it was lower.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Sure. Okay.
That would be the first quarter contribution for 2021.
Okay. Yeah.
Are we going to revisit the discount rate to make a change at this time? Or would that wait until you present preliminary valuation results for 1/1/21?
Yeah, so a couple of things that I'm seeing right now. The 2021 total MMO payments are less than they were last year, about 98,000 lower. And the reason for that is last year's MMOs, especially on the police side, when we had drafted those in August of 2019, we were using preliminary Act 205 results. And when the final reports were issued, and during the actuarial review, Buyer Barber identified a couple of the amortization pieces that had been fully paid. So what ended up happening was last year's police MMO was higher than it needed to be in terms of what the Act 205 report showed. This year, for 2021's MMO, the updated amortization was used on the form. And that was offset a little bit by growth in payroll, as it does every year. But for 2021, the total deposit is about 98,000 less. Based on what happened with the market and the funding ratio now where it's at, I do not suggest that you make any contributions over and above what is required on the MMO. And as you have done in the past, you've taken that and made quarterly deposits to take advantage of dollar cost averaging.
So does that mean that it's $98,000 less than was budgeted?
No.
No, we budgeted the MMO. The MMO was larger than it needed to be.
Right, so the contribution, is it what we're going to need to make, is it $98,000 less than budget?
No.
So the MMO was higher than it needed to be.
Last year.
For 2020.
Last year.
Oh, okay.
So for 2021, you can see there the total MMO, which was budgeted, 1,191,000 and change. But it's less than last year's actual payment. And so, Phyllis, it looks like you just took the budgeted amounts and spread it out over the 4 quarters, correct?
Well, I took the MMO and I reduced it by the amount of state aid that's anticipated.
Right.
We estimated 5,000 per unit. The 53 active members equate to 80 units. So we budgeted and we anticipate state aid in the amount of 400,000. That would leave a gap between the MMO and the estimated state aid of 791,000. Part of that obligation will be met as we make our defined contributions, which we do with each payroll for those members. That leaves a balance of 709,000. Although the fire appears overfunded there, we have not, by past practice, used overfunding in one plan to offset the liability in another plan. So I do not recommend any additional fire contributions. However, for both the police plan and the non-uniform plan, I've taken the remaining balance and spread it over 4 quarters. So I'm looking to, I'm suggesting that we make the first quarter contribution to the police plan in the amount of $144,484, and a first quarter contribution for the non-uniform plan in the amount of $36,632. And there would be a motion required to make those payments. Ron, do you agree with that approach?
Yes. Yep. And then after the third quarter, state aid comes in, you compare that to what you've paid and you just pay the balance.
Correct.
But I don't suggest that you provide any funding over and above what the MMO totals are this year.
Okay, so we need a motion to go ahead and do that. Everyone do one?
Question.
Go
Ron,
ahead.
what's the reason for not suggesting that? We don't want to be overfunded and jeopardize state aid?
Exactly. You don't want to be so overfunded that it reduces state aid that is available to you. And you're already at that point, and that's where we're going to use some actuarial assumptions to get you back to where you want to be.
But if we cut.
And
if
the
we cut
assumed
the-
rate of return that we're operating under is 7.5, or are we reducing it by another 0.25%? Or are you suggesting taking it all the way to 6.5?
I didn't make a suggestion yet. I wanted you to, do you want to do that now, or do you want to determine this funding?
I was going the same place you are, John, so that's what I'm looking at.
Okay, so based on that GASB 68 updated data, there's two things that I see are going to happen for the next Act 205 report. First is the actuarial profession is updating the mortality table in pretty much across the board in all plans. There is and I think I mentioned this in one of our earlier meetings, there is now a public sector actuarial table that's available and that's being used by the three main firms. That takes into account, police officer, firefighter, and public works employees as they built that table. So that mortality update will use up some of that overfunded position. The second component is that interest rate, my suspicion is you will be able to go at a 0.5% and still generate enough state aid so that you get close to the maximum. Going the full percent, I think will put you a little too low. I think 0.25% won't be enough. I think 0.5%, but we will create those scenarios and show you the different amounts, under each one, and then you'll be able to select the one that you want to use in the final report.
So based on, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, based on our earlier conversation, one of the earlier slides, 0.5 point to give you about $1 million out of that too, cut that in half, and we still would be overfunded.
Well,
which is a good thing, I guess.
I took a look at what the break-even point is, and we actually want to get the funding ratio close to just under 100%. If it is at 99%, yeah, who's ever running the chart, could you go back up to the summary of the GASB?
Up two more. There we go.
There, yeah. So you see, I'll use the police column there. It's overfunded 1.25 million, right? So if the final report actually looked like that, what would happen would be the amortization piece that's on the MMO, which is now $590,000, goes away completely, and you get a 10% credit off of that $1.2 million. So that's over $700,000 swing on the MMO. That's too much, though. The non-uniform plan too also would have a $31,000 credit. The fire plan is pretty much at break even now. So if the MMOs were reduced by all of those pieces, the amortization of the police and non-uniform completely goes away and you get that 10% credit, that's over $900,000, and that puts you under the state aid cap. what gets you close to the state aid would be to not have those credits be there. So if all three plans were right around 99%, that 10% credit would go away. That would reduce the total cost by about $750,000. If you compare that to your MMOs, that puts you at about a $400 and some thousand cost. And if that's over the 400,000 state aid, that's where we want to be. Does that make sense, John? Greg?
Yes.
Always a pleasure to hear you try to explain that. Sometimes I get most of it.
All right. So yeah,
Exactly.
it's this, how do we come to equilibrium with taking advantage of the reduced costs, but still having enough cost that you would get the full allocation of state aid and maybe have a little bit of a payment above that.
One quick question, Ron. If our funding went down, if our funding ratios or whatever you call it, if we were only at 90%, do we get less state aid if we're underfunded?
No. You get
less if you're overfunded, I think.
You get more, but remember, there's always a cap. There's not an unlimited pool.
Okay.
And so, Phyllis mentioned earlier, if the unit value is 5,000 and you have so many units, we're looking at last year, I think you actually received 389,000 of state aid. This year, it's coming close to 400,000. So that's the break-even point that we want to try and be close to, but slightly over, so that you get everything that's available.
We want to owe slightly more than what the maximum amount of aid is.
Exactly.
And the resolution that we looked at earlier, I don't remember how long ago that was that we passed it, but that our target
19.
in 19, our target's to get to 6.5.
Right.
In quarter point increments.
Right.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be quarter point increments. We could go further if we wanted to.
Has to be at least a quarter point.
And you've come up with the perfect calculation to tell us what we should do?
When we actually run the valuations and I show you those scenarios, side by side, here's what happens if you do a quarter, a half, 3/4, a full, we'll show you all the pieces. It's possible, based on where you're at, that you might want to go 3/4 of a point because it gets you all the state aid and your remaining payment over and above that is only $100,000. I don't know exactly what that is yet. What I was saying is, if the 205 report looks exactly the way that GASB 68 numbers came out, this is where you would be.
And one more question, is the 6.5 in our resolution, was that a goal set by the state?
No, internally.
That was our goal, I think.
That was our goal. Yeah.
Is there a suggestion from the state? I mean, the whole thing was based on a suggestion that everybody's assumptions were too high for years.
The state does not give you guidance on what that rate should be.
Okay.
Our actuarial firm will say, hey, you have to be able to support that assumption through investment, projections.
Right.
And so what we're saying is those long-term projections have been coming down and are continuing. You need to stay in line with those.
Right.
Okay, so I am
Okay.
now it's my turn to be a little lost. So you are gonna at some point this year tell us what that magic number would be,
right?
To get just under the amount to get us to basically 99%. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, I think somewhere in the high 90% is what's going to put you slightly above the state aid cap.
And does that mean we still need to make our MMO obligation?
Yes, but if your MMO is 500,000 and you're getting 400,000 of state aid, your borough contribution is going to be very small.
So at this point, if we went this direction, we wouldn't be making an MMO contribution in the first quarter.
The effects of these changes, you won't realize until we do the 2022
Right,
MMO
next year.
counts.
Okay, all right. So we're still going to make the same $181,000 MMO.
You have to do
contribution.
the MMO, right?
Okay.
You have to do that this year. We're
Sorry.
talking about next
Completely
year's
lost my
funding.
mind. Sorry.
Yep.
All right. and just as a general recap, I mean, and I've said this 100 times, and this will probably be the last time I say it, but that December of the last MMO, I think it was 19, when the stock market lost 10% in 1 month and then recovered most of it the next month. And we were based on that, I think, created our shortfall in the first place, if I remember correctly. The next month, if we look at our funding, and we were probably up 6% the following month, but we had to deal with what we were dealing with at a picture in time. I think this is also the flips. This could be not as significant, but is also the flip side of that coin, where we're seeing the fruits of that, because we were so low at that one point in time, and now we're actually in a pretty good spot. So I guess what I don't want to do is get us in a spot where we get used to lower MMO obligations to turn around and expect this kind of return on our investments all the time. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, and you may decide, when we look at those scenarios, that you want to still, keep some additional funding over and above what state aid is providing, having a longer term view of things.
That's part of the benefit that we're seeing is we were putting in all that extra money for several years now. And we're able to take advantage of the growth, this phenomenal growth over the last 2 years.
Yeah, the growth was compounded by your additional payments.
Sure. Understood. No arguments there. I'm just,
Yeah.
okay. So we still need a motion to make the MMO payment of $181,116.75.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so I heard, I'm not sure who made the motion.
John.
John, seconded by
Tom.
all right, so we have a motion and a second. Any opposed? We're all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Phyllis, go ahead and make the payment.
Okay. I have one additional question. With the audits that we've recently undergone, the auditors have asked to view documentation of the council's oversight of the pension administration. And I was wondering if it was sufficient to just mention all this in the minutes, or if we should actually make a motion to accept the GASB reports. Is Chris on this call?
Yeah, I'd have a motion to accept the reports.
Okay, so we need a motion to accept the, was the GASB 68 reports?
Yes.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, motion has been made. Second.
Second, John.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Okay. Moving on.
All right, so that concludes the pension discussion. Ron, thank Barry. Thank you
Thanks,
very
guys.
much. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Phyllis, you mentioned the audit, and even though the exit conference was held, it seems like it's not over yet. So I don't know if
Yeah,
there's any.
it seems like it's under a second review.
Yeah.
It's moved from the field auditor to the audit supervisor. And I continue to receive questions from him.
As do I. So. Okay.
Till it's over. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
See ya.
Thanks.
Okay.
Ready to
Phyllis?
continue? All right, with the February results. First, reporting the cash and investment position. The total at the end of February was $7,646,000. 3.6 million of that is held in demand accounts at the bank. Another 4 million is now in investments. In addition to the ICS account, which is really low at the 1/10 of 1%, 2 CDs were purchased. A 6-month CD with a 0.2% interest rate will mature in August. A 12-month CD was purchased for $2 million, the 0.45% interest rate, and that will mature in February of 2022. In addition to the cash that you see, there is one additional pending reimbursement on our grant activity from DCED. Approximately $200,000 in estimated engineering fees will be applied for with the next BARWIS application. The balance compared to the end of January was a decrease of 205,000, a decrease from the year end of 962,000, which is not unusual. The first 2 months of any year, there's not significant revenue collected, so we do typically experience a deficit during that period. It is, however, an increase over the same time last year when there was a lot of capital expenditures. So that's the result of having not made those expenditures. Right, any questions on the cash or investment position?
Nope.
Okay, moving on to view the fund balance recap. We ended the year with fund balance of 9,499,000. Of that amount, we have recorded reserves. The January deficit of 848,000. The deficit increased with February's results by 494,000. The year-to-date deficit is 1,343,000, leaving an overall fund balance of 8,156,000. The reserves that have been recorded total 738,000. I've highlighted in the peach color the changes that have occurred since the end of January in terms of our reserves. To the MS4 commitment, I've added 1 month of the 80,000 that was budgeted for the year, bringing the total reserve to 253,000. We've also added an amount for a reimbursement that is due to Equus. That is a result of engineering fees that they have paid in excess of the original agreement of 200,000. The 126 number that you see is a net result of the excess that they have paid, netted down by other open receivables that they currently have for other land development projects that are unrelated to the 4th Street development. So with total reserves of 738,000, the unreserved fund balance at the end of February is 7,418,000. Any question how we got to that point? Okay, we've made some additional adjustments to fund balance to reflect pending activity. The same DCED reimbursement for estimated engineering fees would add to the fund balance, as would uncollected permit fees. We have incurred expenses from craft codes in relationship to project development. The open permit fees of $1,500, although not a significant number, would be in addition to fund balance. Those are reimbursements that we are waiting to receive. Already included in the fund balance, I've made note at the bottom of the worksheet that there are accounts receivable that are already included in fund balance, but have not yet been collected. So the difference between the cash balance that's reported and the fund balance that's reported are these uncollected, yeah, uncollected accounts receivable. When you look at the water, sewer, and refuse, that total about 400,000 is a typical cycle of our utility billing. At the end of February, we are only billing the commercial entities. At the end of a calendar quarter, when we build the larger borough, that receivable number will be much higher. The general fund accounts receivable is made up of a lot of different reimbursements that we are waiting to receive, including engineering fees, legal fees, curbing balances, sidewalks, false alarms, fire inspection fees. All those types of things are expenses that the borough has incurred, and we are awaiting reimbursement from various developers and residents. Any questions about the open receivable balances that are reported? No? Okay. We can go on then to compare the February results. The columns to the left compare just the monthly results. The columns to the right compare the year-to-date results. So if you look at the month of February in terms of revenue over the last 3 years, and we're including 2019 because we will reach a point where 2020 will look very odd because of the pandemic. You can see very little variance in the revenues that are collected. That's true in terms of the month of February as well as year-to-date results February. When we look at expenses, also similar, what you'll see is a slight uptick because of the cost of the payroll will increase from year to year. The 2019 expenditures are a result of capital expenditures that held over from 2018, where projects fell from one year to the next and the final payment apps were made in the beginning of 2019. The next page will show the net results. When you look at February 21 versus February 20, you'll see a small deficit of 38,000. Not unusual, again, as a result of escalated payroll costs. When you look at year-to-date results, really not a significant variance. I just wanted to point out the unusual transactions during the month of February. Previously pending was the receipt from DCED for the third BARWIS application that was received during the month of February. We also received from 2019 the DEP performance grant. There's always a lag in that timing. Also included in our results, we ordered the decontamination system. That was not a piece of equipment that was originally budgeted, but it has been ordered, and I believe delivery is anticipated any week now. Okay. We go on to look at the real estate tax bills were printed and distributed. Many of you probably have already received your bills. The good news is that the assessed value of $1,020,000,000 that was used at the time we budgeted is the exact amount that was used when the bills were printed. So there's no loss of revenue there as a result of reassessment. The only change that occurred between the estimate that we were provided in October and the assessment values that were used when the bills were printed is that the county discovered that Mission Barbecue was erroneously included in the borough where it should have been in Berkshire Heights. So District 96, which is a larger borough, and District 96A have an equal change there to move Mission Barbecue from one to the other. There are still pending appeals and they will drag out for untold months. So we go on to look at the actual real estate tax collections in the month of February. The only tax that was received was from the county. It was a collection of $855 for delinquent taxes from prior years. Betsy has alerted me to the fact that the county has implemented a new software system. Betsy, as well as all the other tax collectors in the area, are having difficulties with the new software. By this time, she would have already received checks, but they are having difficulty posting those checks in the new system. So we will see that there will be a delay in processing tax payments.
Great.
All right. If we go on to look, there was an inquiry last meeting as to how much delinquent tax is actually sitting with the county office to collect. They put together an Excel sheet for me and then I kind of sorted it by year. You can see some of the properties go back to 2014. Actually, the property for 14, 15, 16 are all the same. It's a property on Spring Street that is in bankruptcy. While property is in bankruptcy, apparently it can't be sent to sale. The more current balances you can see are held over from 20 and from 2019. So the total balance of uncollected taxes that the county is trying to collect on the borough's behalf is $70,000. Those are recorded when received because the timing of those receipts are just too unknown. Is there any question about the delinquent tax collections?
So the high number in 20 may not be indicative of the pandemic. It may just be that there's always a lag collecting delinquent taxes, I would guess.
Well, the amount that was turned over at the end of 20 was actually very low. It was less than 1% of our total available taxes. There's an actual 2-year process before those properties go to sale, actually 21-month process before they actually go out for upset sale. Those who aren't sold at an upset sale then go on to a judicial sale, like the sheriff's sale. So there's a lengthy process before the properties are actually sold. Okay. The next recaps the local taxes. 2 comments here for the real estate transfer tax. We are still waiting for the transfer tax resulting from the sale of the Equus properties. Michelle, are you on this call?
I am.
What did you learn from the county?
That the recorder of deeds office is severely backed up, which is why the deeds have not been recorded. They anticipate that to happen. I checked the tax records again on Tuesday. It's still not showing the change in ownership. So I would hope at some point this month.
We will continue to look for that amount. There was, however, 2 large commercial properties that did sell during the month of February. One was located at 1170 Berkshire Boulevard. That was a Tower Health property that sold and generated $31,000 in transfer tax. Also, a piece of Wyomissing Square was sold to Stratix, and that generated a transfer tax of $12,500. And therefore, you see a positive variance during the month of February and year to date. Typically, transfer tax on a monthly basis averages anywhere between 20 and 40,000 would be a usual collection period. I'll continue to point out any large sales that occur. The other local tax where you see a significant variance is in the local services tax. This is also a result of the county updating its software. It's changed the timing of when we receive the monthly local service tax receipts. Previously, we received the collection for February by the last day of the month of February. Now it's delayed till March. Melissa, if you go on to the next slide, you can see the timing of LST. You can see in previous years, there's large receipts in February, May, August, and November. That did not occur in February of 21 as it has in past years. That's not indicative of the amount of LST that was collected, just that we won't receive it until March. So that is creating a large variance when we compare February results as well as year-to-date February results. Okay, any questions there? All right, the next is an update on the capital projects. During the month of February, the activity related to 4th Street include the receipt of the reimbursement for application number 3, as well as the approval of application number 4. So pending council approval next week will be a payment app in the amount of $116,938. I have not seen application number 5 yet. That should be arriving any day now. That would be worked through the end of February.
So we're working on budget.
Yep. All right, if we go on to the sewer, this is the sewer project that was approved at the end of 2020. Payment app number 2 was approved by, no, it's not yet approved. It's a pending approval by the infrastructure committee. When I received this application, I did notice an error in the calculation of the retainage. They used the amount from application number 1. I've requested that that be corrected before it goes to the infrastructure committee for approval.
Okay.
And the last project is the water project for Monroe Avenue. The bids were open. The low bidder was Barasso. And the infrastructure committee has recommended that award, and that should take place at the next council meeting. So there's no financial action on that application yet.
So it's back to the sewer project. Did we pay the $81,000 already?
Yes.
Or is that pending, waiting to be?
Oh, that's waiting. Yeah.
Okay.
That is waiting approval. Yes.
Okay. Because the reserve is still at 160.
Yeah, no, that has not yet been paid. You can see that was just worked through February.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was approved at the last meeting or not.
Yeah.
And then Monroe, the water project is well under budget so far.
So far, there are some add-ons that Jim would like the committee to consider, but the amount that was recommended by the infrastructure committee was $97,000.
Okay.
All right, the next schedule shows expenditures of a capital nature. In the month of February, we're very limited. We paid for the radio for the dump truck that was delivered in 2020. There was engineering fees related to 4th Street that were not billed to Equus because they've already exceeded their max. And the amount that's listed for park improvement is actually a payment on the Stonehouse master plan. We had anticipated that billing to be final during 2020 with a payment of the $12,000. That brings the project to about 80% complete. So there will be an additional $5,000 on the Stonehouse master plan that will be recorded but was not originally budgeted. So total expenditures of a capital nature during the month of February total $20,000. Right. That's all I have for February results. I believe the next is just an audit update. As Ron mentioned, the pension plan audit, the field works completed by the initial auditor is currently under review by Harrisburg. The Herbine audit, the field work is complete. The reports are pending, and Herbine will be scheduled to present the reports at the next finance meeting in April. The workers' comp audit is also complete. That work is performed by a company that is hired by the insurance company. It's now under review by the insurance company. There is a credit pending. There's a lot of different variances in the 2020 workers' comp audit. There was a category made available to us for COVID wages where there is no charge to those wages. So any wages that were paid because of the borough's quarantine policy or any heart and lung payments that were made related to COVID were wages that we could take out of more expensive categories and put into a zero cost category. That's going to generate a credit. There was, of course, all the wages for the summer recreation programs that were not paid that also contributed to the credit. Offset by of those two credits were higher wages than anticipated for the firefighters. When we budgeted and estimated those wages for the 2020 policy, the contract had not yet been settled. When the contract was settled and the market adjustment was paid, the firefighters' wages were much higher than anticipated. Those two offsetting factors should result in a credit to the borough of about $1,100 as a result of the workers' comp audit. Okay, any questions on the audit status?
Good.
Okay, the last page I have, when we met last month, I had asked about paying vendors electronically because of the problems experienced with postal delivery. There are 3 problematic vendors that include Cardmender Services, which is the borough's Visa card, the Home Depot credit card. The next page will also show UGI. These are vendors where the payments are now being late each time, and we are calling and getting finance charges waived, but there's going to come a time when they're not going to allow that to happen. These are 3 vendors particularly that I would like to pay electronically. The rest of the list, which is about 70 vendors, are all vendors that we pay each and every month, sometimes more than once a month. where we would like to investigate whether we can pay them electronically. We can amend our process so that we can prepare an electronic file. We can have the check signers review the file and then send the file to the bank for processing. So there would still be a review process prior to making the ACH payments. So at a minimum, I'm asking that the 3 problematic vendors be approved for ACH payment. And as a larger approval, I'm looking for the approval to investigate which one of these vendors on this list would accept ACH payments. So, any discussion on
No,
ACH?
as long as we have oversight and we can save Tom carpal tunnel, we're in good shape.
Okay, so
Sign
I
those
think
checks every month.
this is this would be a change in procedure. I don't think a motion is necessary, but I believe we should have committee approval at a minimum.
Chris, do you see any issue on doing it this way? I mean, I don't, but
I don't see an issue with it, but I would, for the record, like to have a motion.
Oh, it's
Okay,
my
so
only
I'll make the
comment would
motion
be, my only comment, Phyllis, would be if you're gonna do this, why don't you add some more of them to save yourself some time?
Well, we'll have to contact the vendors, get their banking information, and ask that they'll accept these payments electronically. So it's going to be a process to work through the lists that we routinely pay. We already pay, there's 3 payments that we already pay automatically. One would be the monthly payment to the library for their operating support, one to Spring Township for the fire management, and one to a former police officer, which is a reimbursement of the post-retirement benefit. Those were all approved in the budget and are already going electronically. What I'm asking to do is add to those payments that are made electronically.
okay, so I don't know if I want to make the motion just to add these 3. I would say I'd make the motion to, as you come up with them, go ahead and start paying them electronically on anybody on this list. Does anybody have a problem with that?
Oh, I'll second that.
Okay,
Okay, we will proceed.
but all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay.
Okay, that's all I have to report for February. Are there other questions or other business?
I think there's some other things we need to talk about, right? Michelle?
Yes, I have 3 things actually. So what you're looking at is a picture of existing stairs that are located off of Parkside Drive North. They come off of Parkside Drive North and go down to the trail that leads from the Stone House over towards the swimming pool. These stairs are more than 20 years old. They're constructed of railroad ties and blacktop surfacing. They're showing signs of severe deterioration, and we've received several reports from people that have used them that they've tripped or fallen, leading us to, be worried about them being a liability. Dan Doyne and I went out and, measured everything, got some cost estimates together to remove the steps, backfill the area left by them, remove a small area of tree and vegetation, and then recreate the trail using, typical gravel modified stone and gently sloping it down Parkside Drive so there's not a grade issue. The cost to do that is approximately $11,800 based off of materials and staff time. We could do the work completely in-house. And I did have Jim McCarthy come out and look at the area to make sure we're not in violation of any, conservation district or DEP regulations. So, we could go ahead and do this at any time. Obviously, this is not a budgeted expenditure, but because of the potential liability issue, I wanted to bring it to the Finance Committee's attention to see if there was an appetite to move forward with recommending to council the expenditure to go ahead with the project.
If you're gonna use in-house labor, though, the true cost isn't $11,000.
Well,
Or is the $11,000 in addition to?
the $11,000 is for 48 tons of 2A modified stone, 24 tons of screening, landscape erosion fabric, miscellaneous materials, and disposal of the old railroad ties, grass seed, blacktop millings, and equipment rental. Equipment rental, the actual equipment is the most expensive part. That's almost $10,000.
So If anybody, does everybody know where this is? First of all, that's the field house at the high school, sort of in the back left of that. Everybody know where we're talking about?
Oh, yeah.
And I've walked it 1,000 times. It is deteriorating to the point that it's ridiculous. I would also mention that if we do make this change to this, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this is big in my mind, that to access the trail there is not handicap accessible. There's no way a wheelchair is getting down those steps. Period. When we implement, if we go through this process, it would be a wheelchair accessible entrance. Correct, Michelle?
Correct. The other thing to add is Arcatera looked at this study, or I'm sorry, this area as part of their study. Their quote to remove and replace as is was about $30,000.
Can't believe that.
So this would end up coming, if you're familiar with that, you're walking, if I'm not, please correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm walking towards these steps down near on the trail, the pool would be on my left.
Yes.
Instead of turning right to go up these steps, I'd in essence continue to go straight and we'd pop out somewhere above the pool.
Correct.
Are we looking for a motion to go ahead with this project?
Yeah, the question is, do we want to spend 30,000 to replace them and not be handicap accessible? Or do we want to spend 11,000 and change to do it the other way?
I think.
So yeah, we're looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we remove the steps and make it ADA accessible.
Anybody want to second that?
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to go ahead with the process of eliminating those steps and doing what Michelle said earlier. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I assume we have to move this on to the infrastructure committee at this point, but so moved.
I will make sure that gets added to the infrastructure agenda. The next item on this agenda was to discuss rec events that will not happen in 2021 because of COVID, and looking at taking the unused funds from some of those events and using them for other rec-related programs. Specifically, the egg hunt has been canceled. There was about $1,300 budgeted for that. The fishing rodeo is going to happen. That may actually incur some additional expenses because instead of doing it in the usual area, we're expanding it all the way down to Ruth's Bridge to allow for social distancing, meaning we may need to purchase some extra fish just to, carry that distance. Memorial Day parade, the parade itself council needs to vote on it next week, but the recommendation from the rec board is to cancel the actual parade, go ahead with a very small ceremony at Memorial Park and videotape it so we could have that on the website for anyone that wants to participate after the fact or watch it. A decision has not yet been made about the 4th of July parade. We have $15,000 budgeted for 4th of July, $7,000 budgeted for the Memorial Day parade. Based off the rec board meeting in February, it looks like we're going to go ahead with concerts in the park, movies in the park, but pushing the start date for all of those programs back a month. So instead of starting in June, they would start in July, and then the June date would get pushed to sometime in September. So of rec events, the ones that I foresee there being some budgeted funds available from because of them not happening the way they typically do or at all, it would be the Easter egg hunt, the Memorial Day parade, and the 4th of July parade.
And what do you
They didn't say
suggest?
anything about the 4th of July parade yet.
No, but that's one that
That's
is
big.
potentially.
So what you're looking for at the rec board, what we're looking for as the rec board, because I'm on that committee, is to say, at this point, we didn't use any funds for the Easter egg hunt. We're not going to use any funds for the Easter egg hunt, and we're going to significantly reduce the cost of the Memorial Day event. What they'd like to do is be able to take those dollars and reallocate them within the rec administration, not more, just to be equal to those dollar amounts for other things that we can do to support the projects that are going to happen or the programs.
That's fine. I think that's a great idea. Other,
I don't know if we need a motion. It's just gonna be just look different because the budget number won't change. It's just the items within the budget will change.
well, if we do, I'll make the motion that we just let them keep the money within their own, reallocate it to other things.
Okay, second of that,
Yeah, second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Moving on.
The third item I have to bring up at the February infrastructure meeting, the bollards at the Berkshire Heights playground, if you're coming from Crossing Drive heading towards the playground, that Spring Street is in front of you. There's about 41 linear feet of bollards there. Those bollards are also in very poor condition. A few of them are actually knocked over by the snowplow in the recent winter events. The concern is if a car comes through that intersection and goes up over the curb, there's now going to be nothing to stop it from going down the hill and potentially taking out someone that's playing on the sports fields that are right there. So I compared from a quote we had in 2019 when we replaced the guardrail above the tennis courts at the Stonehouse. We paid $605 a linear foot. Based off of the 41 feet plus an expansion of an additional 34 to cover the dugout, we would be looking at 75 linear feet of guardrail, which would cost $45,000, which does not even include traffic and mobilization. So I talked to Jim Babb and Dan yesterday. They're recommending we stick with bollards because bollards will actually stop a vehicle versus a guardrail. Guardrail will just deflect a vehicle. Jim said we could take existing water pipe that we have, cut it into 8-foot lengths, use an auger to dig holes. 4 foot of the pipe would be concreted underground in place. The remaining 4 feet would be sticking above ground. We'd pour concrete into the above ground portion in the center to more securely hold it in place. And estimated cost between materials and borough staff time is, I'm going to say $10,000 to $11,000. So this is one I think needs to go back to the infrastructure committee for a final recommendation to move forward, but also wanted to make the finance committee aware in advance. Infrastructure meets a week from Monday. So it would be nice to be able to say finance has already talked about it and is in favor of moving forward with the project.
I don't know if anybody's gone over there, seen it, but some of those safety features, if you look right below that hill, there's a batting cage or two and a concession stand. I mean, if you have something roll over down there, it's a bad plan at the wrong time. So I know it's unbudgeted. I hate to do it, but I think just like the steps, I think it's a safety issue and quite frankly, significant safety issue.
I make a motion that we move that on to finance or move it on to infrastructure.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we'll have to make up for it somewhere. Hopefully that Monroe Avenue project will make up for it.
Along those lines, Steve, did you want me to talk about the unofficial state and local COVID allocations?
Who?
I'm sorry,
You cut out. I'm sorry.
I said, did you want me to talk about the unofficial state and local COVID allocation?
Sure.
I received an email from Colleen Terry, our grant writer, a few weeks ago. She had a spreadsheet that was provided to her by someone from the state. The spreadsheet breaks down what each municipal government, county government, and other government entities throughout the entire country would get if the current federal stimulus package moves forward and is approved. In the case of the borough, we would be looking at an allocation of anywhere from $1.9 to $2.3 million. So, as that package moves forward, the federal government, stay tuned and I'll let you know what, if anything, we'll end up receiving.
Are there attachments to that as far as it has to be used for certain things, or it's a matching fund, or it's just dollars?
As of now, no additional information has been provided. It's just dollars.
Crazy.
Crazy.
May as well take it though.
Yeah, I guess we will.
Jim
We already
Babb might be
paid
getting
for
his
it.
building. Jim Babb might be getting his building a little sooner.
Yeah, we can take it and our grandkids can all pay for it. All right. Does anybody else? I have one last thing I want to mention. Does anybody else have anything for the good of the group?
I have one thing, John Woodward here. The rosy picture we just got on the, pension funds, is that going to come back to shoot us in the foot when we work on the collective bargaining agreements from the 3 units? Are they going to say, you guys are flush with cash, throw some more at us? Or is that too simplistic?
Well, John, I could tell you from being on, and Tom is on the committee too, when we negotiated contracts before. I mean, the goal is to stay funded within parameters. I think that's the right thing to do. And I would never, they can say that we're flush with cash because we're not behind in our pension payments, but I think that's our obligation. I think if we don't do something to maybe say we're overfunded in our obligation, maybe that they could come back and do that. But I think as long as we stay within a funding method, I think we'll be okay. But I get your point. I totally understand your point.
My experience has been that collective bargaining units always look at the bottom line. We're flush. If we're flush, if we have a nice surplus, I mean, they'll always look at that and try to push for more. It's just the nature of the beast.
Yep.
I can honestly say that every negotiation that I've been involved in since 2006, never has there been a mention of our pension funds.
Yeah.
Every one of those since we put Gerard and their previous companies in charge of that fund, they've always been more than pleased at the performance and the way the borough has always added additional money to the fund to ensure adequate funds for their retirement. I don't think you're ever going to hear that from them.
Which, by the way, Pat, do you want to bring up what the MMP thing, or is that not appropriate to talk about right now?
The MNP is in process. We've requested an extension for a year. The negotiating committee has come up with some facts that are tentatively been approved by the Maintenance and Parks. That agreement is back with Maintenance and Parks for review. We're waiting for a signed copy to come back, and then that will go to council.
So that's just an update on that. Does anybody, I have one last thing to say, but does anybody have any other comments? Okay, so I'm gonna make a real short, brief statement. I'm gonna state on behalf, as I am the chair of the Finance and Admin Committee, and I am speaking not on behalf of the Finance and Admin Committee or the Borough Council. I'm speaking on behalf of myself as the head of the committee. And I have never been made aware of any or substantiated any discrimination charges or have personally never noticed any discrimination by any kind of any employee at the Borough of Wyomissing. I just think that's important to say when people are accusing people of discrimination, that I have yet to see this, that it is a portion of discrimination for any particular reason with anybody. And I do feel that I could speak for this entire committee in saying, if there was ever discrimination involved, I think there would be a major significant issue with that employee. And the state.
Steve, I can echo that sentiment. I mean, I've been involved for a long time. Committee now, Borough Council, and Finance and Admin Committee a long time ago. I've never heard or seen anything of that myself. So just to add on to what you said.
Okay. Anybody else have anything for the good of the group?
Can I ask you a question? How do you define discrimination? Because I don't think that Mr. Brandenburg.
I'm
does
sorry,
not
this isn't the
answer
public.
either.
This isn't the public comment section. So I made a statement at the end of the meeting. Does anybody have anything else for the good of the meeting?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second. Thank you at all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.